What does it mean to be great? It's not based on yards per carry or touchdowns or even rings. I'm Chris Long, the host of American Prodigies, Becoming Great. Join me each week as I take you inside some of the most fascinating NFL stories with some of the best to ever do it. American Prodigies, Becoming Great. New episodes every Thursday. Listen in wherever you get your podcasts. Presented by WynnBET.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring an in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric here alongside Rod, and we're going to do our post-game show for the Grand Valley State game, which was the exhibition here to start off the 2022-2023 season. Michigan State won 73-56. Before we get into that, I just want to thank Juris Clovens for a one-time donation to PayPal, and as a reminder to help keep this show not behind a paywall, you can certainly go to tffinots.com/support. You can either be a monthly donor, or you can give one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo. I'd also encourage you to go to the website to sign up to be on the mailing list, and then also to join our Spartan community on their message board and the forum that we have created. And finally, if you've not yet had an opportunity, please go to the podcast player of your choice and rate and review the show. We appreciate those written reviews. They help drive other Spartan fans to our show. All right, so a lot of anticipation for this season. The football's kind of gone south the last month and a half, and so everyone's excited to be back on the hardwood. And I got back. It was nice to be back at the Breslin Center. We had a new parking spot. The heckler was still behind me, so unfortunately that hasn't fixed itself, but it will next year when we get the seat reassignment. But anyway, I was, I think, very pleased in general. I think with a lot of the questions we had going into the season. And I don't know, where do you want to start? Should we just go through the 5 keys, or just your general impression of the game?
No, we talk about general impression of the game first, I think. I'm with you. There were definitely some things to really like and be optimistic and enthused about. There were also some things, in fairness, that were not great, and we'll talk about those. I think in general, Michigan State obviously gave a much more focused performance on the defensive end and on the glass to some extent in the second half, and that's why you saw a 5-point halftime deficit turn into a 17-point final margin of victory. The numbers, sometimes numbers can obscure the truth. In this case, they don't. In the first half, Grand Valley shot 51.6% from the floor. In the second half, 27.6%. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And I don't think in this case it was just because shots weren't falling. I think Michigan State did, in general, a much better job defensively in the second half. Some of the Grand Valley's success in the first half, I think you give credit to them. I think they hit some tough shots in the first half, but in the second half, you saw Michigan State bring a much more focused and higher energy effort to the defensive end, and I think the numbers reflect that.
Yeah, my impression was of the game, certainly early on, it felt like they were sort of playing down to the competition, or they hadn't taken Grand Valley very seriously. They were sort of playing it like a scrimmage and just almost like a practice, and I think not with the intensity that you'd expect, although maybe I guess you'd expect it for this sort of game. And I think, yeah, I do agree that Grand Valley hit some tough shots, but I think that's sort of a reflection of sometimes of, once you've had some success, you just feel more confident when shooting, and so you're going to hit shots that are a little bit hard that you weren't hitting, or that you wouldn't ordinarily hit. And then by the second half, when Michigan State started tightening the screws, they really struggled getting into any sort of offense and really having, there were a number of possessions in a row where they just couldn't. They were barely even on offense. They would turn the ball over, and I think, and I want to say my one impression, before we get into the specific things, I was really surprised that Michigan State had a dozen steals. I don't remember the last time we've had that many steals, and they weren't just like knocking balls away in the paint or out of the big's hands. They were like stripping guards and very active in the perimeter in getting those steals, and that and that just, I don't feel like I've ever seen that before. It's been a long time since we have. I do realize it's Grand Valley, et cetera, but still, that sort of defensive focus, or I guess edge, is something we just haven't seen, I don't think.
I think that's true. And I think this is something I believe we touched on at some point in the preseason. They have a group of guards that are much better with their hands than we typically see from a Tom Izzo team. And you even saw that last year, I felt at times. Tyson Walker in particular is a guy who has, I think, found that balance between playing aggressively with his hands, causing disruption, forcing turnovers without gambling. That's why you typically don't see Michigan State do very much of that. Tom Izzo's defensive philosophy is not predicated on being disruptive that way, because usually when you have guys that are, gambling for steals, they are truly gambling, meaning if they lose, they're giving up a wide open shot, penetration of the rim, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things that Izzo doesn't want. His defensive philosophy is predicated on making you take a low percentage shot. That's it. And so he would much rather have guys stay steady and not be looking to try to strip someone. That said, if you can do that while staying steady, fine. And I think Michigan State has a group of guards that are capable of doing that. I mean, just to put some numbers to what you're talking about, between Hoggard and Walker, the starting guards alone, those two guys combined for 10 steals.
Yeah.
Hoggard had 4, Walker had 6. That's an incredible number. They got 3 other steals from other guys. One from Jackson Kohler, one from Jason Whitens, and one from Trey Holloman. They don't have Jaden Akins yet, who will be another guy who has the potential to be disruptive. I think that the MSU guards as a group have a chance to be really, really good defensively. Like, I didn't even feel AJ Hoggard played particularly well defensively, not especially in the first half. I didn't think he was very good at all. But they still, as a group, even with that, and we know AJ's capable of playing good defense, still as a group, even with him kind of on an off day, and Jaden Akins, who might be their steadiest guy, not playing, they still look good because Tyson Walker was so good. And I was really impressed with Trey Holloman. Not surprised, but impressed at both ends. I think defensively, I saw Jim Comparoni made a comment last night, which was interesting to me. He said he thinks that Holloman has a chance to be, and I'm paraphrasing, but a higher octane Travis Walton. And what he's getting at there is, I think, and we've talked about this before with Trey Holloman, because he was also a football player, he's got a little different kind of mentality than many of the guys who come through the program these days in an era we're in where there are fewer and fewer dual sport players coming out of high school. Trey Holloman is one. And he kind of approaches defense. I don't know if you felt that way watching it, but I did. Very impressive the way he defended. I mean, he is up in guys' grills and he takes it as a personal challenge. And I think you saw a lot of good things from him in that area for sure. So, yeah, I obviously I would agree with what you said. It was kind of an uncharacteristic performance from MSU in terms of the number of steals that they had, but I also don't think it's the last time we're going to see that kind of thing.
I don't either. And to your point initially that, it's you maintaining position and staying solid so that people can't blow by you. You see lots of the steal attempts, people, lunge for the ball to, get a fast break. And if you miss it, then the guy's by you. I don't think there were any of them that were like that. They were just, Walker especially just has really fast hands. And I don't know. I mean, it's going to be, he'll be a challenge for lots of point guards this season. So,
but that's the thing though, man, just not to belabor it, but it's not just him.
No, right.
I mean, Jaden Akins can guard point guards. AJ Hoggard can. Trey Holloman definitely can. They've got a whole group, those 4 guys. Whew, I don't want to be. And here's the other thing I felt I don't know how you saw it, but I think Michigan State, at least last night, and I expect to see this as we go into the season, is playing a little more aggressively in terms of how high a line those guards are taking. We're used to Michigan State not playing a true, sagging kind of defense, but they've never been particularly aggressive with ball pressure. As a rule, that's not generally MSU's MO. But I think this group is going to apply more of that than we're used to seeing, in part because I think they can do it and not get burned for it.
Yeah.
I think these guys are good enough and they're athletic enough as a group that I don't think they'll pay the price you sometimes do for being that aggressive.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, you look at Walker. I mean, 6 feet tall, but he had 2 blocks in that game, and those were legit blocks too.
Yeah,
like he just murdered people. They got by him, and it didn't matter.
Well, yeah, and Hoggard had 2 blocks. I mean, that's the thing. Michigan State 13 steals, 10 blocks as a team. Now, yeah, it's Grand Valley, blah blah blah. It's still indicative of the activity level that you're playing with, and so that's something I think to be happy about and to watch as we go forward.
Well, and I think it just emphasizes what we had anticipated coming into the season. The strength of this team is going to be the guard play. And that's probably, that's where you're going to get your scoring. That's where you can get your defense. And then obviously the other areas are more questionable, especially down low. Well, let's go into the 5 keys of the game. The number 1 was to stay healthy. As far as we know, everyone was healthy. Jade Akins didn't seem to injure himself running onto the floor a couple times when I watched TV timeouts. He looked pretty good. I mean, just running out, like hugging people and stuff. So he looked fine. I think Tyson Walker cramped up a couple times, but they're just cramps. Hoggard sort of kind of half twisted his ankle, but he came back and seemed fine in the second half. So I don't think there were really any issues there. So at least that part, my center to me said, I hope Whitens, doesn't blow out his other ACL or something like that. In the end.
No, I think you're right. They seem to come through it just fine. So, mission accomplished there.
So then let's talk about, I guess, one of the negatives. And so one of the things we were looking at coming into the season is, can the offensive and defensive rebounding improve, especially specifically defensive rebounding? And, the final rebounding stats are Michigan State won 39-37. They gave up 12 offensive rebounds. They had 10 of their own. I guess you'd say against a team that you would expect to be able to push them around a little bit. I know they are D2, and we talked about this. They're not like a real small team, though. Like, I feel like I've seen some of these D1 teams come in from, like the SWAC and stuff, and they're really tiny teams. This team was not really small. But in any event, I don't think rebounding, I don't know what the edge is. I don't have it broken down by half, but I think they had the rebounding advantage at halftime. And then Michigan State was a little bit more in focus in the second half. So I guess you'd say concerning, I was happy to see Hoggard he had 4 rebounds or something. He had, I guess 2. So I thought he had more. Oh no, he had 5 rebounds. Yeah. So he was pretty active. So they got some rebounding and, plays you don't expect to get it. I don't know. I mean, I guess what's your impression? I think it's something they just still need to work on.
If you're looking for the biggest negative, that was it. I did not think they did a great job. They're better in the second half, but here was a stat that I think is kind of telling in this game. Grand Valley had 9 team rebounds, 5 on the offensive end, 4 on the defensive end. So that means where the ball's knocked out of bounds and they determine possession off a missed shot, nobody gets a clean rebound. That to me, and Michigan State conversely only had 3. Mm-hmm. That, as much as anything else, tells me something about the toughness and the activity level that the 2 teams played with. I just didn't think, and Izzo said the same thing. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but yeah. I was not overly impressed with how hard Michigan State went at the boards. It's got to be better than that. It just has to be. I didn't have a problem with the big men, and I rarely do. I think Michigan State's big men generally approach it the way they're supposed to. Mady Sissoko had 6 boards in 20 minutes. Jackson Kohler, 5 boards in 13. Joey Hauser may be a little disappointing, only 4 rebounds in 27 minutes. But, by and large, the bigs I thought were okay. It's just I'm a broken record on this. If Michigan State's going to get better as a group, it's going to have to come via the wings. Now, in fairness to them, they're missing Jaden Akins, who has the potential to be as good as anybody in that group on the boards.
Yeah.
So that's a loss, but that can't be an excuse. I was really disappointed with that first half rebounding effort. Again, it got a little better in the second, but they got a long way to go, and it's going to require everybody. You can't, Malik Hall 3 rebounds. That's in 29 minutes. That's not good enough. And I hear this stuff from some people who cover the team and about, the Malik Hall, the 3 thing, that one of the problems is it's taking one of your better rebounders and putting him in a position where he's not going to be around the rim as much. Okay, I get that point, but I also know that in the modern era, that's not what it's all about, because you have so many 3-point attempts that go up. You have so many range rebounds that are outside of the area that a big man typically is going to be in, that your wings need to be active. And that was a problem. So Malik, I don't buy that as an excuse for him that, he's playing a lot of 3, so he's not in prime position to get a lot of rebounds. I don't buy that.
Yeah.
He's got to be better, and not just him, everybody. But definitely disappointing. And if you're looking for one thing to be concerned about coming out of this game, that's it. And it also happens to be the thing that I think we both believe Michigan State's got to get better in if they're going to surprise to the upside this year.
Yep. And then one of the other keys, of course, was transition. And I thought the transition game was okay. I mean, their fast break points were 21-7 in advantage Michigan State.
Boy, I gotta say,
I don't feel like it was that much. There were a couple breakaways
but that's it.
Yeah.
It was what transition game I remember them having was largely off those strips,
yes,
which is fine, but that's not how Michigan State typically does it. I thought MSU was not good at all in terms of pushing the ball, and part of that was their inability to get clean defensive rebounds. So I'm talking about those team rebounds. What a telling stat that is to me in this game. It's because Grand Valley was getting to loose balls a lot. Even if they weren't securing it, they were deflecting it. They were forcing Michigan State to deflect it. Preventing clean rebounds is going to hold MSU's transition game down. I also thought that Grand Valley did a pretty good job in terms of floor balance. So we've talked about this in the past on this podcast. I never trust the fast break point stat that you see in the box scores, and I don't trust this one because it did not feel like MSU had 21 fast break points.
No, I agree. I mean, there were, I will just leave it at that because I guess I can't go back and remember every single time. They might have happened, like you said, it might have been off turnovers more than that. We just don't recall.
There was
those.
some of that. But MSU I didn't feel that they were, to be honest, this was a subpar game overall from AJ Hoggard. Not a total disaster because he did some good things, but that was not the best of AJ Hoggard. In the first half, he was very shaky defensively. He got better in the second. But I also didn't think he was looking to push as much as he needs to. I didn't think MSU's wings generally ran the floor as hard as they need to. Overall, it felt like it was a little bit played in molasses.
If I had to use a word to describe Hoggard's play, I would just use the word casual. He seemed to not play at the near, he just shows up and he's just going to kind of just be there. And that's
and it's the flip side of it is I thought Tyson Walker was as aggressive as I've ever seen him.
Yep.
And I thought he looked like a guy that is ready to stand up and take charge a little bit. I saw hints of that last night, which is really good. But Michigan State's got to have better than that from AJ Hoggard. They have to. He can't come out and just, as you say, play casually and think that that's going to get the job done. He isn't that good.
Yeah, I think, one example is he had 4 turnovers that game, which is uncharacteristic for him. I guess you say, well, he had 4 steals, so I guess he broke even. But he had 4 turnovers,
that's not
5 assists. Right? It's not right. It's not the typical thing. And a couple of those were just him just dribbling into too much traffic, like just kind of silly. I don't know. I mean, I just thought he looked casual. He didn't have a lot of intensity for that game. He just kind of showed up and not ready, just kind of almost like someone going to training camp and just, not taking it quite seriously enough. Who knows he's going to be a starter, so he doesn't have to worry about things. But I totally agree. Walker, that was hitting those curls, like 15-foot jump shots, which were wide open. And I mean, reminiscence of that Michigan game in Ann Arbor last year where he passed every single one of those up, and this time he was shooting them and made most of them.
Well, and talking about Tyson, okay, he was 2 for 6 from 3. You hope for a little better accuracy, but I'm just enthused by the 6.
Yeah.
In that equation. He wasn't hesitating, not once. And you remember how often we would see that last year, a wide open shot, be it from 3 or be it inside the arc, that he would pass up. I didn't think there was a single occasion in that game where he had a good look that he passed on. That is what they need, period. If they get that kind of play, that kind of aggression from Tyson Walker, we're going to like the results.
And you probably could say if he's shooting 2 for 6, 3 for 6 every night, you probably take that. It's not
absolutely
great. I mean, that's not 40%, like plus 40, but with that sort of volume, if you're hitting high 30s, you'll take it.
He'll shoot better than this.
Oh, for sure.
I think I'd be surprised if, no matter what the volume is, if he's not, around 40% at least. But that's the thing. If he's 40% at a much higher volume, that's what you want.
And to speak about shooting, Malik Hall was 3 for 5 so he looked just as good as he did last year. He looked solid from deep. And then, okay, so I saw Hoggard shoot at Moneyball. I was not impressed. He looked good. I mean, both his shots.
Yeah.
And I think they both were in transition, sort of, or like he was. I feel like they were. One was in transition. One was like he was rotated back to him, right? I think. And
no, one came inside out with Jackson Kohler, I believe. Yeah.
And I mean, didn't hesitate. Just drained it. And he's obviously not going to shoot 100% all year. Or I don't know. I mean, it looks really good. I guess I don't know what else to say except that. I think he's not going to be sub 30, right? I mean, I think that's probably a very good development. That's one of the things we're hoping for this season. I think we're going to get a better plus 30% shooter.
That was the big positive from AJ. I think that, and he had a little more juice in the second half overall. But yeah, the shots falling, that's a big deal because as we've talked about before, if he can be, even a 30% guy, it changes the way. I think we talked about how it was strange in some respects, to me at least, that defenses didn't sag off him more last year. But I think if he can truly be a threat, at least a credible threat from 3, it's going to continue to make things available for him in terms of his real strengths, which is getting to the rim, converting himself or finding others on kickouts or dump offs. And that's where he really shines.
Yeah. He had a couple of nice lobs inside to Sissoko.
Yep.
And he had and I was watching them as they were trying to guard him, and there are a lot of missed steals and then he's past them and then his trouble, and then also them trying to even pick him up from that far out. He kind of gets by him anyway. He sort of just bodies him out of the way. He's a tough guy to cover, 6'4". He's
and strong.
Dude. Yeah. Strong guy. All right. So then the thing that everyone was, apoplectic about all summer, worried about, concerned was Mady Sissoko. What's going to happen to the 5? This team's doomed. Guy who can't stay in the game without fouling. I will admit I was guilty of worrying about the fouling issue as well. And I realized this exhibition, my wife turned to me and my son were like, yeah, they're going to be fine. And so I think it's important to point out at least I'm not right now saying Mady Sissoko is going to be Big Ten, whatever number of the year or any team, in the season, like he's a 3rd team, all Big Ten or something like that. But I think you can probably feel fairly confident he's going to be serviceable. And if anything, he didn't look lost. He just looked like he just didn't have much experience. He just looked like a guy who hasn't played much, and that's kind of my impression. But he didn't look like he was playing without confidence, which I always felt like last year he was playing to just like do as much as he could with whatever little bit of time he had in the game. And he didn't look that way to me this time. And I was watching him when he's off the ball, which I don't even could see on TV and I thought he looked pretty good. Seemed to be able to come out on ball screens a little bit and didn't seem to get lost on switches. I don't know. What's your impression watching the game?
I was very happy. I was very happy with the play of the fives as a group in general, but let's start with Mady since he played the most minutes. I was most interested in him as a defender because to me, that's where the rubber hits the road for him and for this team is they need someone, and he's the guy, he's the candidate because he's the veteran. They need someone to be able to go out there and do the minimum level things that they need from a five. I thought he showed an ability to do those things. You talk about not looking lost and all that. That is a function of confidence. And you feel confidence when you feel as if you understand what you're being asked to do. It enables you to play faster. And it enables you to look like you're playing with a purpose and with understanding because, in fact, you do have a purpose and you do understand. And that is where he has gotten to. Now, I'm not saying this is a smooth path up to first team All Big Ten. There will be bumps in the road. He's going to get, at a minimum, he's going to get severely challenged early in the season with some of the big men that he's going to face. So there are going to be some moments, some rough moments. You just have to accept that. That's what's coming. Okay. But in general, I think you saw plenty from him last night that confirms all the things that people who have watched practices have said, the things that Izzo has said, and now we're seeing it. I thought he looked actually really good on pick and roll. I didn't recognize it. And look, Izzo's going to have a different take on it for sure. But to my eyes, I don't recall any occasions where he made at least blatantly obvious mistakes in pick and roll coverage. I thought he was able to contain the dribbler and yet not get lost with the roll ban. That's what Michigan State needs. They need a big man who can extend those plays out, extend that action out, not give up quick hitters, either on a roll man to the rim or an open look or penetration to the rim from the point guard. That's the bare minimum. And if you can't do that in the modern game, you are in a world of hurt. And Michigan State seems to have a guy who's capable of doing those things, in terms of post defense, I thought he was okay. There were some occasions in the first half where he got scored on, but that kid, he was the transfer from Northern Illinois, led them in scoring in the Eastern game and led them again last night. That kid can play.
He's good.
Yeah. And that's obvious. Yeah. And I wasn't worried. I wasn't bothered by that stuff too much. Again, in low post isolation situations against certain guys, Mady will have some trouble at times. But I also think he's capable of putting up some resistance. I've seen enough there to believe he looks like he knows what he's doing. And then you add in the other elements. I thought rebounding, no, he hasn't turned into a dominant rebounder by any means. But I thought he looked better. The biggest thing was something that I think I saw Jim Comparoni mention after he'd watched a practice, and you could really see it in that game. Compare how often Mady last night was playing off of 2 feet as opposed to what we saw in his first 2 years. If you think back to a lot of occasions where Mady Sissoko over the last 2 years is, let's say, going up for a rebound, he's often in a situation where one leg is splayed out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he didn't see that last night. Yeah. He's playing offensively, defensively, and in terms of rebounding, he's playing off of 2 feet, which is going to make a big difference for him, I think. So the rebounding, not a dominant performance, but decent, something to build on. I think it was plenty okay. Offensively, I mean, he had that turnaround jumper on the baseline.
Yep.
Which you're seeing a guy who's worked very hard. And I think now, again, I don't think Michigan State needs him to be a double-digit scorer, and I don't think he will consistently do that for them. But I think he's pretty clearly capable of giving them some offense. This is not the same player you've seen the last 2 years. Where it all ends up in terms of the counting stats and all that, that remains to be seen. But this is clearly a guy who has made the jump that Izzo talked about over the offseason. And, you know, if they get that kind of play from him, well, guess who maybe looks smart for not having rushed into the portal? How about that? The other two guys, I thought Jackson Kohler had that quick burst at the start of the second half, early in the second half.
Yep.
Where he showed you what he could do.
Yeah, they're impressive moves.
Yeah. I thought he was okay. You know, look, we know going in, pick and roll defense is going to be a challenge for him. Learning how to run the floor the way Michigan State demands is going to be a challenge. Right? But everything you hear is that his work ethic's great, his want to is great. I think he will find ways to get better. It's just going to take some time. You know, you look at that game, he had 6 points and 5 rebounds in 13 minutes.
Yeah.
I know I talked about this in the preseason. This is what he's capable of doing and what I think we will see from him. His per minute production in the counting stats is going to be good. And it's going to make casual fans or even media types who don't actually watch the games wonder, why isn't this guy playing more?
Yeah.
Well, that's because the equation is, how much is he given away defensively in order for you to be able to take advantage of what he can do offensively and as a rebounder? And that is going to be the tension all year long for him. But I thought he showed out pretty well for his first real action. And again, he's another guy I think is going to look very different in February than he does now. And then Carson Cooper, didn't get a ton of run, but played. And I think showed the kind of ability to move that we've been talking about. He had one thing it was impressive, but at the same time, something he's got to learn. He had that play late in the game where he sent a shot into the fifth row. He got his block. And the thing is, that's not what you want to do in that situation. You want to control a block so you give your team the chance to get possession, right? That swatting into the fifth row stuff is kind of 70s, 80s basketball. It's not really how you're supposed to do it these days. So he'll learn that. He'll get better. But other than that, I was pretty happy with the way he played as well. The way, again, with all these guys, my primary focus was just on how they're moving. So some of what you were talking about, how do they look lost? And I didn't think even Kohler, I don't think Kohler looked lost particularly. I just think he's got some nuances to figure out. He doesn't have the quickest lateral movement. So it's going to be a process for him to figure out ways to cheat that a little bit and get better. But all three of those guys, I thought, moved confidently. They looked like they knew what they were doing. And they all had their moments. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I thought the one block that Sissoko had, I watched the guy got by and he came off his man for weak side block and protected the rim. That was really great. He recognized when it was safe to move over. I thought, to your point, I thought he looked like he knew where he was going, and he was covering ball screens well. I think there's little doubt who the best 5-man is. It's Sissoko, and it's not even really close. Offensively, you could argue Kohler's got some offensive moves and stuff, but he still looks like he's not quite, he's just doesn't quite know where he's supposed to be. I was watching him, and he just looked at times, like the switches and people coming down, throwing screens down low. He just looked a little lost at times, which I would totally expect for a freshman coming in playing, this kind of basketball. So I think he'll be, like you said, he'll be different in February.
Let's also note that Mady Sissoko, 20 minutes played, 1 foul, and it came with 6 and change to go in the game.
Yeah, if you had Mady Sissoko with 1 foul with 34 minutes of the game on your bingo card.
Yeah, that's why I really do. I think, again, not to pile on Graham Couch, because I understand where he was coming from, but and it's also not to say there won't be games where Mady gets into foul trouble, because I'm sure there will. But I think we're starting to see enough data points coming into play. What Izzo has had to say about him in that regard, what reportedly he did against Tennessee in that way. And now we've seen it in this game. He's clearly playing differently.
That's a big difference, right? He's just playing smarter, and he has better position, and I think you went to Jim Comparoni's point where he's playing on 2 legs and he has a solid base, so he's not
absolutely.
He can't even, if he wants to, he can't even reach. And what always got him into trouble is over the back, where he's not like he's 7'3", right? So he would end up running to people.
And that was something else it's worth noting too, that I liked about the way he played last night, where I said, well, he didn't have a dominant rebounding game, and he didn't. But you know what he also didn't do? He wasn't trying to make those 5% or 2% plays where you have a rebound, he's screened off, boxed out, or just too far away from the ball to have a realistic chance at getting it, and yet still tries to make a play.
Yeah.
That is where big men, more than anything else, I think, get themselves into trouble, is on plays like that. And you didn't see Mady do any of that last night. So that ability to discern when the moment's right to try and make an effort play and when it's going to put you in a bad spot is really important. And I think he passed that test with flying colors as well.
Yeah. So then I guess the next step would be to sort of anticipate where you want to be in order to have those opportunity to get those rebounds. And that's, next level. And and to your point, Hauser had 1 foul, at least one, where it was the, trying to go over someone. And
yeah, he had a deflection. He was trying to deflect it, kind of the slap back to the perimeter, and he got called. And, and once in a great while, that kind of moment is fine, but, it won't hurt you that much. But it unfortunately, guys who tend to do that do it a lot. And Mady definitely had been a guy who had shown that tendency in the past. He didn't show it last night.
Yeah. So I think, overall you're looking at, it's an exhibition game. So obviously the game doesn't count. It's just basically a scrimmage that we can watch as fans. And so what do we take away? The things looking into the season, we were concerned about the 5. I think I'm not concerned about the 5. I'm not going to point to it as a strength, but I think that is not something to be worried about as much. In fact, it may be better than last year, which I think is not impossible to believe is the case. I think the shooting is improved by Hoggard. Whether, where he ends up is, I think, going to be questionable, but I think the shooting overall is probably going to be fine. It's the rebounding that'd be the one concern I guess you have going through the rest of the season. I think the rest of it, I think they looked pretty much like we expected and hoped they would. And so I still remain cautiously optimistic about the season overall, and recognizing too that potentially our best player, one of our best players, wasn't even on the floor. One of our best athlete, right? So there you go.
That's the first thing is, this team will also take on a different dimension when they have Jaden Akins out there. I do think it's going to be interesting to watch how the rotation evolves, because I think there are some things to watch. One of them is this. There's the Malik call the 3 thing. And so I think there is a feeling among some that's not utilizing him at his best position. And I understand that train of thought. But I think the difficulty is they want to get he and Hauser on the floor much more than they did last season. Mm-hmm. And I think that's correct. I think that's the right assessment. if you thought that you could get away with playing one of those two guys as a small ball 5 and the other at the 4, okay. I don't think they're going to be able to do that for long stretches. I think we'll see that as a move they can make, but not with frequency. So if you're going to get Hall and Hauser out there together a fair amount, it's got to be one of those two moves. Either one of them plays the 5 or one of them plays the 3. And I personally think, even with any questions some might have about Malik Hall as a 3, I think that's the better of those two options across the board. That's my feeling, at least at this point. Maybe I'll feel differently down the line. But it then raises, there's a real question that's facing Michigan State coming up probably over the next few days. When Jaden Akins is back, what happens? I think the Tyson Walker that we saw last night clearly is a guy who deserves to start. Whether he does or not, I don't know. But how do you make that work? Because I think the feeling is, well, Jaden Akins is clearly a starter. So is he starting at the 2 and Tyson is coming off the bench? Because I think they'll still stick with AJ as the point guard. As the starter, rather. But I think how the rotation works with that combination of players that I just walked through is going to be very interesting, because Izzo's got to make some decisions and he's got to get buy-in from those players. Whoever the 6th man is going to play a lot of minutes. They're going to play starters minutes. I mean, we know that. But I think sometimes there are certain guys who can thrive in that role coming off the bench, take it as a challenge. And there are other guys, we've talked about this in the past with Joey Hauser. He just seems to be a guy that kind of psychologically needs to start.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what MSU does. I mean, obviously Jaden Akins came off the bench all last year, but I think his expectation, and frankly, it seems the coaching staff's expectation, is that this time around, he's a starter.
Yeah.
So what do you do? How do you make all those pieces fit? So that's one thing. I think another thing that I find interesting, the word I got is that Pierre Brooks played pretty well against Tennessee. I didn't think he was great last night by any means, although I will say he had one play that had me excited for the only points he scored, the offensive rebound and putback he scored. They need that. And that play is a absolutely clear-cut bit of evidence as to why I think Pierre Brooks needs to be in that rotation. He's got something to give that they don't get from anybody else on the roster. I won't name the podcast, but I was looking at a podcast I'm sure a lot of our listeners also see after the game last night. And there was talk about, with Trey Holloman's wingspan, he can probably play about as big as Pierre Brooks did, and he could take some of those minutes if Pierre Brooks doesn't get it into gear. I said, look, I'm Trey Holloman. I've been insistent is going to force his way into minutes. So that him playing well and looking good does not surprise me. But Pierre Brooks gives you a different package in terms of his size and strength than they have from anybody else on the wing other than Malik Hall. So you got to get that from somewhere. They're going to need that. And again, as part of this, in my mind, imperative to improve their defensive rebounding, the wing group has to be a part of that. Pierre Brooks should be a part of that. Now, he's got to do those things. But that's something to watch.
I was just going to say, I wonder if he has to recognize that maybe his way onto the floor is to be a rebounder more than a scorer. Because I think he thought, like last year, as soon as he gets the ball, he's got to shoot and score.
Yeah, and I still think some of that's going on. I think it's fair to say that there's still some reprogramming that might need to happen with Pierre. I wouldn't argue against that notion, but I've seen some stuff today that I really like and doesn't jibe with what my understanding is.
Yeah.
Lots of, let's just put it this way, lots and lots and lots of guys who every Michigan State fan looks back on with great fondness had moments of tough love as freshmen and sophomores from the coaching staff. And maybe Pierre Brooks is going through some of that now, but his package, his physical attributes and his skill set is something that this team absolutely can use and needs, in my opinion. So that's one to watch, but he's got to play better too. In fair, it's not unfair at all to criticize the way he played overall yesterday. That's fair. But I've seen some stuff today I really like in terms of criticism of him that I think is unfair and not reflective of the reality, at least as I understand it. So there's that. And then the other thing I'm really excited about, more so even than I thought I would be, watching that game yesterday. Boy, Michigan State is in good shape at the point. They really are. And it's so critical because, even though it was not a great game from AJ Hoggard, he still, if you look at the performance, it doesn't look that bad on the stat sheet, right?
Right.
And we know that wasn't a great performance, but he still contributed. Tyson Walker, clearly capable of helping out at that position anytime you need him to. And now you add Trey Holloman. And I think, Trey Holloman had maybe one of the best first games from a freshman I've ever seen when that freshman didn't score.
Yes.
I thought he looked so comfortable running their offense. He does not look like a guy that's going to get flustered. He looks in control. I think he's capable of doing more. I mean, this is a kid, if you watched his high school clips, this is a guy who not only is capable of making the right reads, he's capable of making spectacular plays as a playmaker. We will see more of that, I'm sure, as his career goes on. So he showed a lot of good things last night. He's got even more to show. And then we talked about him defensively. I just think, it's going to be hard to keep that kid off the floor because I think he does the things that Izzo values so much. And I'll tell you, if you're AJ Hoggard, you better not sleepwalk through too many more games.
Yes. Yeah, you'll get pulled for him for sure.
Yeah. They can use Trey Holloman as a true freshman as a guy to hold others accountable, which is a remarkable thing, but I think it's true.
Yeah, my son turned to me and said, they need to call him the safe because he locks you down. And I thought, but he was really good on the ball. I mean, he was, no one got by him. He had a couple deflections, a couple of steals, I think.
He had one. Well, he's credited with one steal, but I thought just in terms of, fighting over the way he handled pick and rolls, where I thought AJ was lazy a little bit in the first half. Trey Holloman was not lazy. The way he squares up a ball handler, the guy he's guarding, and doesn't give up dribble penetration easily. I mean, it was just really, really impressive. And then again, on offense, just looking I can count guys who were great point guards at Michigan State who I didn't think looked that comfortable this early with the ball in their hands as freshmen. I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Right, and he played 17 minutes. He was 0 for 2 from 3, and those were his only field goal attempts. But he had 3 rebounds, 1 offensive, 3 assists, and a steal. I mean, that's not
and no turnovers.
No
right?
turnovers, no fouls.
Right.
Yeah. I think watching the game, their offense did not run as well when he was in as point guard. That is as much a reflection of who else is around you, can score, et cetera, et cetera. So, but he was defensively very good. I mean, I can definitely see why it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor, like you said, and he will easily be a person you use to keep people accountable. And going back a little bit to Malik Hall, the one criticism I would have of Hall in that game is when he was playing 3 defensively, he struggled a little bit. I don't know if it was just it was the quickness, or it was just where he was playing on the floor. He just maybe wasn't used to it as much, but he definitely struggled a little more. But you could definitely see them having, him playing the 4 with Akins, Walker, and Hoggard, and then either, have either Sissoko, Kohler, or Hauser in at the 5 too, giving spells. So you could still have you could see him probably playing both, but maybe a little bit more 3 than 4, like 60-40 or something. I don't know. I mean, it's my hunch.
Look, I think when Akins is back, they will use Malik more at the 4 than they did last night. I think that's the equation for sure. But I don't see. I get the sense that there's some people who think that this Malik call, the 3 thing, is just another Izzo off-season talking point. When push comes to shove, it won't really play out that way. I don't believe that because of roster construction, because of who is on this team.
Yeah.
And they feel they need to get certain guys out there together. And for, this has been an ongoing point of discussion with Malik Call for the last 2 years at least, is sometimes he struggles, and particularly I think he struggles when he's not being utilized enough. So then the argument becomes, well, you got to play him more because that gives him more time to settle into the game, and then eventually you get, the kind of performance you want out of him. Well, that means he's got to play minutes. So how do you get him those minutes? You're not going to play Joey Hauser 15 minutes.
Right.
That's not going to happen. So what else are you going to do? I think you're going to have to play him some at the 3. You're probably going to have to live with some defensive issues there from time to time. It kind of also depends on who you're playing against, right?
Sure.
Some teams will have a more dynamic 3 than others. But look, it may be something that we end up looking back at and saying, you know what? This didn't play out to their advantage. But I understand why they're doing it, and I think it's the right thing to do. It's just that you have to understand, it's like we talked about the other day, trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a trade-off here that you just kind of have to accept, with the idea that you think in the end it will make you better for having done it overall. And we'll see what the verdict is on that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably wraps up our discussion. I think overall, pleased with what we saw, that things we had concerns going into the season outside of the rebounding. So hopefully that gets a little better. Maybe that's a function of just people getting used to each other and where they're going to be on the court. I don't know. So anyway, I suppose we'll talk to everyone else in a couple of days as we get ready for the opener in 5 days now against Northern Arizona at the Breslin, before we begin the gauntlet of playing, like, how many ranked teams do we have in the first 6 games? It's got to be 5 of the 6, right? I think are.
Yep. Everything except Northern Arizona.
Yeah. Well, is Villanova ranked? Because I thought I didn't see them on the list. Okay. Yep. Maybe I was just looking at someone's ballot.
They might not deserve to be.
Well, it's preseason.
I mean, that's. Yeah. It's some, Jay Wright hanging over, new coaching regime, but they've also got a couple critical injuries right now. So I mean, specifically right now, are they worthy of being top 20? I don't know that they are, but we'll see.
Well, I guess, and if you're not yet following us on social media, please be sure, and you can check us out on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We're also on Twitter. At Twitter, the handle is at TFFINOTS68. So until next time, Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.